Hello, and welcome to the first video on Chapter 15 of Government in America, covering the federal courts. Up until now, most of our focus has been on the way people interact with the legislative and executive branches, but that doesn't mean that the judicial branch is insignificant. It has considerable power to shape the actions of American government and to define what is and what is not legitimate within the American political system. That's because when there's a controversy about how a specific law or government action should be applied in a particular instance, it's the judicial branch that has to make the decision. Now, the courts consider both civil and criminal cases. Criminal cases are cases where someone has violated the law in a way that offends or injures all of society. So the government takes action against the accused on behalf of the community. So this is why criminal cases are often named the people versus so-and-so or United States versus such and such. The public at large, represented by the government, is taking action to address the wrong that the accused has allegedly done. But sometimes someone is accused of violating the law in a way that really only hurts one particular person or group. And so that person or group has the responsibility of asking the courts to fix the situation. That type of case is called a civil case and would be referred to as something like Smith versus Jones. When we call a case Smith versus Jones, Smith is the plaintiff, the person making the complaint or accusation. Jones is the defendant. In order to be a plaintiff, you must have what the courts call standing to sue. You have to be able to show that what you accuse the defendant of doing hurt you in some specific way that you deserve to, in some way, be compensated or made whole for. It's not enough that you don't like what some person or group did, or that what they did hurt somebody else. You need to show that you are the person who was wronged in order to get the standing to bring the case. If you do not have standing, but you really have an opinion and you want to let the court know how you feel, you can file an amicus curiae brief. Amicus curiae is a Latin phrase. The legal system loves its Latin phrases, and the phrase means friend of the court. Interest groups use amicus curiae briefs to give friendly advice to the judges deciding a case, hoping to influence the decision. So once you know that you want to file a case, how do you do it? Well, Article 3 is very vague about the structure of the federal judicial branch. It establishes a Supreme Court, but then it says that Congress will establish whatever other courts it sees fit to underneath the Supreme Court. And in fact, the Congress has authority over how many justices sit on the Supreme Court at any one time. So there are constitutional courts which deal with most cases involving the federal government and the Constitution. And then there are legislative courts which are established to hear cases that involve certain predefined areas. The constitutional courts are set up with a hierarchical structure with multiple levels, so that when one court makes a decision, another court at a higher level can basically check the work until the Supreme Court has the power to make a final decision. Now, when you first file a lawsuit, you will do so at the lowest level of the appropriate type of court. This court is then considered the court of original jurisdiction. The court of original jurisdiction has the responsibility of establishing the facts of the case and then deciding how the law should deal with those facts. In a criminal case, this proceeding is the trial. The court has to establish what happened and then decide if the defendant has been proven to have committed a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, the loser in the court of original jurisdiction can file an appeal to a higher level court and ask them to check the work that the lower court did. This higher court now serves as the court of appellate jurisdiction. Now, in most situations, the court of appellate jurisdiction is not reviewing new evidence or facts. It sticks to the factual record established by the court of original jurisdiction. So the court of appellate jurisdiction wouldn't review whether a witness was believable or not, or hear new testimony from witnesses. The court of appellate jurisdiction might review whether the court of original jurisdiction should have allowed a particular witness to testify in the first place. That would be an error of law if the witness had testified and the witness wasn't supposed to. So if the appellate court decides that the original court made a serious error of law, not a fact, of law, the appellate court can overturn the original decision and either order some kind of corrective action or tell the original court to look at the case again after it fixes the error. Now, in most federal cases, the court of original jurisdiction will be a United States District Court. From there, a case could be appealed to a U.S. Court of Appeals, which is also called a circuit court. From circuit courts, cases can go to the Supreme Court, which is the last stop. Now, just because someone files an appeal doesn't mean that the appeal will be heard. The circuit court and the Supreme Court will often refuse to take up a case on appeal if they don't think that there was a chance that the district court made a significant error of law. Now, since court cases often come down to the judgment of the presiding judge or judges, and those judges can serve for life unless they're impeached, the people who sit on the courts have a tremendous amount of influence over American society, and this is why court appointments have become increasingly contentious. Presidents appoint judges, but the Senate must confirm those appointments. If the Senate is controlled by the opposite party to the president, the Senate is likely to oppose many of the president's nominees. This happened when Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia passed away in 2016. Republicans, who had the majority in the Senate, refused to hold hearings to consider President Obama's nominee, so the seat was still open when President Trump was sworn in. President Trump then nominated a conservative judge who was confirmed by the Senate after the Senate eliminated the filibuster for Supreme Court nominations, meaning that the Senate was able to confirm the nominee with a simple majority. Now, in the past, there was also a tradition that senators from the state covered by a district court would have the ability to reject a nominee. This is called the blue slip process, because the senators are supposed to turn in a blue slip of paper indicating that they approve the nominee. Under the blue slip process, if the home state senator refused to turn in the slip, that was it. The nomination was over. Didn't matter what everybody else thinks. Now, the blue slip process has been respected less and less in recent years, but there are still some senators who think it's important, and the failure of a home state senator to turn in the blue slip of approval might influence their vote. Now, having discussed who is on the courts, in the next video, we'll take up how the Supreme Court actually goes about deciding a case. So, thank you for watching, and we'll see you shortly in part 2.